eWAKA was born out of my youngest, Noah, challenging me. He said to me, I don't understand how you can be satisfied being a lawyer in Switzerland when there's so many things to fix where you came from. And then Noah hopped on a motorbike and then just, and you know, this is a kid who had difficulty breathing. And I was like, what are you doing?
Welcome to Founders of Impact. My name is Karen Rundy. I'm one of the directors here at Miller Center for Global Impact. And this episode is really, really special because I'm actually physically in Nairobi, Kenya with an entrepreneur that I've been wanting to talk to for a while. We are with CEO and co-founder Celeste Vogel of eWAKA. Welcome, Celeste.
Well, thank you, Karen, and welcome to Kenya, and welcome to eWAKA.
Yes.
Really, really excited to finally be on your podcast.
Yes,
right.
Yes. We've been wanting to chat with you for a while, and it's amazing that you've been so welcoming to let us actually be physically in eWAKA's space. I don't know if we could talk there. Like, you just gave us this beautiful tour of the eWAKA headquarters, and it's kind of a new space. Like, when did you move in here?
We just moved in October, right? We moved here in October, and this is our fourth move in 4 years.
Yeah.
So this is a huge step, right? I have an office for the first time.
Yeah, which we're in right now. It's beautiful.
I've been working literally from under a tree for the last, like, in one office, our first office, it was literally from under a tree. So this is really exciting.
Yes. Yeah. So we are in eWAKA's warehouse, and it's actually a really cool story because this is actually a very new place that they're in. I don't know if you want to share a little bit about where you started and now we're here.
Yeah, so first of all, welcome again
Thank you.
to eWAKA. Yeah. This is our warehouse, and you know, I am particularly proud of this place because when we started in a container in Hurlingham, and we had everything in there. We had all of our vehicles, we had our desks, and we had our storage room, like in one 40-foot container, right? And just having this place that you see, right?
Incredible. Yeah.
Where we can actually assemble all of our bikes and then just get out. It feels like a factory. We assembled them from scratch, right? Yeah. You can see, like, they come in pieces, and we put them all together. And so it's just, you know, one of these things you have to take a moment to appreciate that you've gotten this far, right?
Yes. Yeah. Congratulations. It truly is a beautiful growth journey, and like, this is the physical testament of all of the great work and leadership that you've done with eWAKA. So congratulations.
Thank you. And really, really nice to have you here. You know, I insisted, I know it's a little far out, but I think it really tells the story of the ecosystem build, right?
I completely agree.
Yeah.
And I'm really excited that we'll also get to test drive some of these bikes very shortly. So stay tuned. Yeah.
Let me put it on manual, right? Like zero.
Manual.
And then you put it on 1.
All right, here we go. This is fun. Ready to roll. Okay. Woo! So smooth, yeah. Well, I think this physical space is just a great representation of eWAKA's amazing scaling journey in the last few years. Ever since we've gotten to know you, I think since 2023 is when you first went through our program. It's just been really special to see how much you've grown as a leader and how much the business has grown as well. So I want to talk about that. But before we jump right in, for folks at home that aren't as familiar with what eWAKA does, eWAKA Mobility, could you walk us through briefly what your business is all about?
Yes. So eWAKA Mobility. eWAKA Mobility is a company, I like to say, at the intersection of transportation and logistics. When we started out as an assembler and deployer of electric cargo bicycles and motorcycles. We quickly realized that that was not going to be enough in this market, right? And so our model has always been a platform-based approach where we not only deploy vehicles, at this point is bicycles and motorcycles, but the platform can accommodate cars, trucks, you name it. And we deploy them to drivers, right? And then on the other hand, in order to ensure that these drivers can actually access the vehicles, we connect them to financing partners. And most importantly, we connect them to jobs, delivery jobs, so that they can actually earn enough, not only to pay for their vehicle, but also to live. And so in order to do that, we manage the fleet. So maybe in summary, one might say we're a fleet manager, but we're a fleet manager who is also an OEM and who is also a maintenance and repair workshop, right? Because we do everything that it takes. We build the ecosystem and we do everything that it takes to ensure that our drivers are able to actually use the asset as a productive use asset. Right? So that's eWAKA in a nutshell.
Yeah, so it's a huge nutshell, as you just said, because it's not just bikes that you're providing, it's an ecosystem, what you said. And when you were first launching eWAKA, did it really just start with, I want to create an e-bike?
eWAKA was born out of really like my children, and in particular my youngest, Noah, challenging me on a trip to Africa where he said to me, you know, I don't understand how you can be satisfied with being a lawyer in Switzerland when there's so many things to fix where you came from. And, you know, kids usually, you know, tell you the uncomfortable truth, right? And so when Noah made this statement, I was bothered by it because I felt like, well, I can't change the continent in order for you to like it, but I was also like challenged by the fact that yes, I was working as a lawyer, as you know, in Switzerland, you know, in spaces that I hadn't built, comfortable spaces that I enjoyed. But, you know, just driving through the streets, in that case, it was the streets of Cotonou in Benin, you know, there was just so much that I could do. The issues that Noah had identified on this trip were, you know, complex ones. So it was issues about blackouts, issues about recycling, right? Born and raised in Switzerland, the recycling was part of his DNA, and he felt like literally like offended by, you know, all of the plastic bottles just being thrown on the beaches and on the streets. And the one that resonated the most with me was transport, because we were on this like narrow road, and then Noah hopped on a motorbike and then just and you know, this is a kid who had difficulty breathing, and I was like, what are you doing? And then, you know, he said, I don't know why they don't use bicycles here, right? And so the idea stayed with me. And so as I was thinking about how, like, what I wanted to do with this challenge, you know, I knew that it would be a humongous task, but it felt like it needed to be broken down to something really small. And so I thought of e-bikes as, you know, a way to actually channel like this need that I could see everywhere in the continent. It wasn't just Benin, you know, it's same in Cameroon, same in Ghana, same in Nigeria, you know, wherever you went, you felt that, you know, being stuck in traffic was just like everybody's daily reality. So that was number one. Then number two is, you know, we live in, you know, when you live outside of Africa, and even now in Kenya, it's the same, but not everywhere in Africa. You know, last mile logistics is like something that is part of your daily reality. You know, whether you're getting food, whether in, you know, in most countries, the postal system does not work. So whether you're getting, you know, deliveries of packages or letters or whatever. And, you know, when we did our first market study, it dawned on me that it really needed to be done in a very intentional manner. So we decided to start with last mile logistics, and then we realized just how painful it was for people to actually get stuff, you know, delivered to them, but not only painful, but expensive. And so that's how we started. We said, let's just put bikes out there and then see how it works. And then we realized that you couldn't just sell bikes, right? No one can afford them, especially not those who need it. And, you know, the ecosystem idea was born like really right from the start, from the realization that you couldn't sell a bike for $1,000 cash. Right, and so we needed to do something different.
Yeah. It was really cool as you were giving us a tour earlier before we sat down, and there's a whole kind of training component that you give to the riders, and then you also addressed the issue of having a license, and that could be so cost prohibitive, but you're actually providing the support so that riders can have a legal license to ride a motorbike here, and that just providing all of these things just to have a bike, I think, is just what makes eWAKA so separate from other e-bike businesses on the market and other bike businesses on the market. My question for that is, what logistically did that look like to set up? Because you're like, okay, we want to provide this thing, but then we need to have this thing, and then we need to have this thing.
Yeah. Bicycles are so much more accessible, I thought, right? I said, you don't need a driver's license. Electric bicycles, I lived in Switzerland, I rode my e-bike everywhere. And I felt like, maybe this could be something to introduce that could actually bring in more people. And I thought of women, I thought of young people. And so I bought 10 bikes. I'll never forget, because I went to this fair in Germany, and then, met these guys who were selling cargo bicycles, and then I thought, I called Jimmy, I talked to my team, and I was like, what do you guys think? And then they were like, yeah. And so those were probably the most expensive bikes that we shipped. We made all the mistakes that you could make. We shipped them by plane because we wanted them to get here faster. They got here 2 months later. They got sequestered at the airport. I mean, it was like a very expensive mistake. But the good news is that when we started showing it to people, we realized that a lot of people actually did not have a driver's license. And because of this, they were actually excluded from this very vibrant economy that, Boda motorcycle riders are part of, right? So they were not part of it. So young people, it's expensive to get a driver's license, and it's expensive to actually own a motorcycle. Like most people get motorcycles on financing, and then after you've gotten financing, you pay for 2 or 3 years for this thing before it becomes yours, right? And so 2 things emerged from that. One is that we had clients, there was high demand, and 2 is that we could put these people to work without having to sell the bike. So that's how our subscription model started, right? And so we started with that, and then we started understanding the dynamics, what was really needed, and we saw that there was this whole other side, even the platforms. Our first client was really Bowl Food, because they were like, can you guys manage a fleet for us? Because independent riders are notoriously, I don't want to say inefficient, but I feel like if you spend the time explaining the algorithms and how you can be successful, they would do really well. So we have a very good fleet. A lot of people are interested in the gender lens aspect of what we do, and they're always asking, how many women riders do you have? How many women have you brought in the space? But the reality is that culturally, riding a bicycle is not something that is part of every girl's upbringing across the continent, right? You have pockets of places where, yes, it's not a problem, but I remember going to Mombasa and thinking, oh, we're going to get a lot of women on here. Forget about it. They're we don't get on bicycles. We don't even want to, right? And so we started teaching people how to ride bicycles. E-bikes have opened up a whole new set of skills that did not exist before. And this discovery fueled our conviction that we were on the right path.
I mean, literally hearing you speak, I can feel that energy coming from you. You've really found your purpose, and I think when you find your purpose, the universe wants you to succeed. And I mean, you've said it so eloquently in what eWAKA encompasses, but I mean, when you think about it, okay, this is what eWAKA is doing. It's not just e-bikes, but you're also creating an entire sort of economic opportunity. You're unlocking so many jobs. You're addressing so many gender dynamics, with your training. I didn't even talk about the environmental impacts of e-bikes as well. It's all of these things are happening through eWAKA, and that's that's not nothing, that's huge. And so I think you know that, but just taking a moment to really pause and say, like, look, this is something that I've created, and it's really making a huge difference on this continent. So I just want to make sure that we're celebrating that, because that's a really big deal.
No, thank you for recognizing that. And as you say that, I think back of conversations that we had in the beginning, right? Like conversations I had here and conversations I had in Switzerland with people. I remember one person telling me at an event in Switzerland, like, that's just like crazy, I mean, do they even have roads in Africa? And I was like, and then he said, e-bikes, like what about like, access to electricity? And I take these things very seriously, because when people say this, they're saying it in a dismissive way, almost in a mocking way. But the reality is that the reason why we don't have roads that lead to people is also because of our history, our colonial history, right? Like
totally.
the infrastructure that we have was not built for that, right? And so yes, two-wheelers are an opportunity for us, number one. Access to electricity is another huge issue that is always on my mind, right? But what that has done is it's unleashed like a desire to actually like tackle that problem. And I know that we cannot solve that problem the way that it was solved in other parts of the world, right? And so it like, the creative and innovative juices just flow, right? And we're determined here at eWAKA, we're really determined to find a solution. And when I don't know who I was talking to before about the technology we've put in place. I was talking to Sola about it, right? It's like, if we would have started like, in a different market, if we would have started in Switzerland, we wouldn't have half of the technology that we have today, because it wouldn't be necessary.
When you talk about turning a challenge into an opportunity, I think that's, in my experience working at Miller Center, the mindset of what is needed to be an entrepreneur, to be a leader. And I feel like you very much embody those qualities as a leader. And you're going to face these kinds of challenges, political or otherwise. That's just part of the business, I think. And so being resilient and still powering through in spite of all of these, whatever challenges. And again, I think that's another testament to your leadership. And so my question, so you've scaled eWAKA in a very short amount of time, I would say. How has your leadership style had to evolve to accommodate such growth? I mean, we met like so many people on your team that are supporting eWAKA's mission. What have you had to do personally as a leader to make sure that you're kind of representing the team in the best way and showing up for your team in the best way possible?
There's this saying of Mandela that says, I think, I did it because I didn't know it was impossible, right? And I really feel that every day, because I remember I started and then I realized, I was cleaning, I was like figuring out, do we need bulbs, so all of these like things that when you walk into a company, it is done for you, right? And that's just like the basic things. Finance, marketing, all these things. Like I was on I was not dealing with those things. All the companies that I worked for had departments that dealt with this, right? So when I started recruiting people, and at the time we had very little funding, so it was just like whatever you can afford, right? I realized that I didn't actually know what they were supposed to do. Right, so finding the right talent is like the first step, right? And then we have incredibly brilliant youth on the continent, right? Like 75% of the population by some counts is like young and under the age of 25. And so you find all these young people who've like, in many cases have taught themselves like the skills that they have, right? And then you bring them in and then you don't know what they are supposed to do. Right, and then once you figure out like what they're supposed to do, you need to like mentor them and bring them into a corporate structure, albeit still very early stage startup. It's still an office, right? Like, so one of the biggest challenges we had in the beginning was getting people to work on time.
Yes.
Right? It was post-COVID, so everybody had this like view that they could work from home and do whatever they were doing from home, and then, you know. So for me, that was really hard because I had come from an environment that was super structured and disciplined, and you know, people knew what they were supposed to do. So that was tough. But I think if I look back now, as you mentioned, I have an amazing team, and we've had a lot of staff change. And, you know, staff attrition is not a good thing for any company. It's expensive, right? Because after 3 months, you have to start over again. But I think now we're at a stage where I feel like I too have grown.
Yeah.
I've learned how to be more tolerant of what I don't know, of what other people don't know.
So you have a co-founder, Jimmy. If I were to have a conversation with Jimmy right now, what would he say that you thrive at the most, and maybe what are some parts that maybe you struggle with the most as a leader?
I'd be curious to hear what he says.
I'll have a separate conversation with him later.
Yeah, I think that, let's start with the latter, right? Like, he would probably say that I'm incredibly demanding. I think in particular, like, it's not a fair question because, you know, Jimmy as my co-founder, like, really gets the tough side of me, right? Because we chose to do this together, which means that, you know, it's you know, I like to say to him, it's a little bit like a marriage, right? Like, you're in there, and then, you know, you have to be able to tell each other uncomfortable truths, and you have to be able to demand the best of each other, right? And so, and, you know, there's a huge age difference, experience difference, you know, between both of us. And so I think he might say, you know, and he would be right, that I expect a lot.
Having trust in your team, I think, is a big one, and honestly, that's something I've had to learn with my time at Miller Center too. Is just trusting your team and like they will handle it, and just kind of taking your hand off the steering wheel. Sometimes take the death grip off the steering wheel. So that really resonated when you told me that. I think talking about last year, when 2025, you know, I follow you on LinkedIn. We've been following eWAKA's success, and a lot of really amazing things have happened for you and your company. You were featured on the BBC, which was like incredible to see. It was amazing. Yeah, pinch moment. And yet at the same time, you know, you had shared with me a lot of things going on in the background in your personal life were happening at the same time. And I feel like that's something that leaders, we often have to deal with. You know, you can have all of the success, but then also when all of these things are happening on the back end, the question is, how do you kind of show up for your team when you really don't feel like showing up? Like, how do you still perform and be there for everybody when you've got kind of all of these personal things going on in your life?
So last year was very tough for me, right? I lost my dad, my best friend, my first love. And then shortly after that, I lost my mom, who was like the pillar of our family. And I think I learned a few things, right? I don't know that it was me showing up. I think I remember when I lost my mom, like my mom died, you know, 3 months after my father died. And so I almost felt like I couldn't tell people. And then one day I was in the office, in our old office, and then they called me out, and my entire team had put together, you know, flowers and cake, and, you know, they wanted to like mourn with me. They were singing and everything.
Wow.
And I don't think I've, you know, ever cried that much, you know. So I think the best part about last year was being able to grieve while in Kenya. I had forgotten, you know, how amazing African culture really is when it comes to just being empathetic and being there. But during that time, you're right, I still needed to pay salaries, still needed to pay rent. Still needed to, you know, drive revenue. And, I wish I could say that I did it all alone, but to be honest, if I look back, and we had a better year last year than the year before when I was like fully in, I feel like my team just showed up for me.
Yeah.
You met Kwamboka earlier, she took on like, 2 roles and just like literally lifted us up. Jimmy was also around, my technical team, just amazing. When we moved, I mean, these guys would like work like all night, right?
Wow.
So, it wasn't necessarily me showing up, it's me feeling like these guys had my back. It wasn't like Celeste is building eWAKA. It was like we are all building eWAKA together, right? And so I think if I look back on the single most important lesson of the last, 4 or 5 years, for me, it's been that it really does take a village.
What's that one proverb? If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. I mean, that's literally what eWAKA is doing together on e-bikes.
Yes, it's like my favorite African proverb.
Yeah.
It's so true.
Yeah.
I've lived it.
Yeah. So I think another thing that comes up in my conversations with many entrepreneurs is burnout. And you did something, you were mentioning you went to a retreat, to get yourself ready for 2026. What would be your advice to entrepreneurs, to leaders that are just kind of on the brink of like, oh God, this is a lot. How do they take care of themselves, so that they can continue to show up, or maybe make the decision, maybe it's time for me to step away? What would be your advice, having gone through kind of a really intense last 12 months?
First of all, I think it's really important to have a way to replenish yourself daily. Not like, wait until like, so for me, for example, is the gym in the morning. I'm an early bird, and no matter what, I go to the gym. I also pray a lot, but that's just me, right? I really feel like my spiritual life is like part of my routine. If I start my day before the gym, in deep prayer. When you have tough life events happening, I think it's important to share. I retreated in me because I felt like if I talk to people, if I start opening up, I'm just gonna break down and I won't be able to, to do what I have to do. So, and maybe this is from spending, years of my life in Switzerland. I don't want to give Swiss a bad name, but I just went inside myself, and then, I felt like that was the way but I don't think it's the right way. I think it's important to share. To find 1 or 2 people that you can talk to, who can, not to give you advice or anything like that. For it's therapeutic, to be able to just share what you're really going through. And so that's the second thing. But the other thing that I did, as you pointed out at the end of last year, I literally finished last year on my knees, right? I was just so physically, emotionally, mentally spent. I thought, I was just working towards that 17th of December when I was going to fly out. And I landed and I literally broke down.
Oh my gosh.
But I had planned, and this is something I've done, often over the last few years, I had planned this retreat. It wasn't meant to be a silent retreat, but I just felt like I had permission now to just be sad. And I slowly came out of it, cleansing my body, my mind, going deep into my faith. And, also sort of distancing myself from social media for a while. No LinkedIn, no Facebook.
Oh gosh,
And, it's incredible how it just works.
I love that. So I feel like that's 3 big nuggets of advice. So one, it's like, you know, having a routine, having space to pray or meditate or just connect spiritually. I think that's very important. I started doing that too, actually, a couple of years ago, just having a daily meditation practice. It's completely transformed my life in so many ways. And then you mentioned being able to share, so like having that community of people where you can just kind of be and talk, I think is also so important. And then the third thing you said is just giving yourself permission to have space, just to take stock. These are three things I think that can carry anybody anywhere in life, and I really appreciate you emphasizing that, because I think it's so important. Coming back to the piece on community, that's at Miller Center, that's what we're trying to do very intentionally, because we've got entrepreneurs like yourself that have, you know, gone through an accelerator program, and now you're at this stage of growth where you don't need maybe a traditional type of program like that, and yet I think still providing support and access to these networks, especially other entrepreneurs, is really important. So the question for you is, what makes a community worth being a part of for you? Because I think you are part of many communities, not just Miller Center, but you mentioned Acumen, and you know there's a few others that you're a part of. What for you personally and professionally, what does a community mean?
Yeah, so you know, I don't know if I've been fortunate or if it's just what the communities that I'm part of have created. But let me take Miller Center as an example, right? And it's not because you are with Miller Center, but no, it really is. And I you know, it's gonna make me emotional to say this, but like my mentor in Miller Center, Erin Keeley. Erin has been like, you know, Erin was like, has been a part of like every success that I've had here.
It's amazing.
She, you know, even when I lost my parents, you know, she called me. She reached out when when we were in, you know, when I have some tough decisions to make, she's the one that I call.
Wow.
You know, her job as a mentor did not stop after the accelerator. In fact, you know, if anything, it's because I'm just like busy running, you know, she would be like my go-to person, right? And that was the first accelerator that, like, I was in the Google for startups before that, but Miller Center was like 6 months, and, you know, I spoke with Erin, and it wasn't, you know, I've had like 3 mentors with Miller Center, but she's the one that like it clicked for me, right? And we shared a lot, and she's the person that I would call, and you know, we developed this relationship. So I felt like, you know, it wasn't like this, you know, you feel like, especially as African women entrepreneurs, you know, so many people come at you with like wanting to teach you, wanting to like build you, you know.
It's so annoying.
And my relationship with Erin was like, you know, she knows so much more about entrepreneurship than I do, and it never felt patronizing. It felt like so, like a you know, someone who's just like looking out for you.
Yes, yeah.
And so that was Miller Center. As an African woman entrepreneur, it's really important to have communities that respect you and don't push you into this space where you constantly have to justify yourself. And the communities that I'm part of, like, they really, like, I think they're doing a really good job of changing that narrative. I've like tried to stay with communities that also give money, because like it's not only just like you know good talk and, you know, pep talk is like, but you know we need to be financed, right? You need the funds.
It's the
and
reality.
So that, and I've gotten really tangible support from you know, from the people that support us. And, you know, so it's the belief in us, and then it's the tangible financial support, which helps. And sometimes financial support is not just money, right? It's also access to certain spaces that otherwise would be too expensive, right? And so I appreciate that a lot, right? And you know, and I'm grateful to Miller Center, You took us out to Silicon Valley. That was my first trip to Silicon Valley, so I'll never forget it. Yeah. And, you treated us like kings and queens. And I think also being pampered like that, through the in residency
yes.
Program, makes you feel like you matter. Yes. Like what you're doing matters.
Thank you for saying that. I really appreciate that. And I think you said a couple things that I wanted to comment on just about Miller Center and the power of the network. And I think, having a network where you're not being patronized is so important, because at least what we found at Miller Center, we've been operating since 2003. The entrepreneurs in our network now have wisdom themselves. So we no longer have to turn to traditional Silicon Valley businessmen to get case studies, but we can turn to you. And so I think that's really important, is tapping into your wisdom and your expertise that can then contribute to the network. I think is very important, honestly, especially as you said, being a woman coming from Africa, we need leaders like that, and there are leaders like that. And so if Miller Center can help sort of cultivate and support that we will. I think that's so important. And the other thing you said about finance, again, that's just the reality of being an entrepreneur, is the fundraising piece of it. So a question to you about fundraising. What's, in your experience, what's been kind of one thing a funder or an investor has asked you for in terms of a metric that for you didn't feel super relevant, or it's like, why are they asking me this? This has nothing to do with what I'm trying to do. Have you found anything like that? Or I guess the question is more, if we zoom out, it's about maybe the disconnect between what funders are looking for and what the reality is of running a business.
Yeah, I mean, I can think of so many examples, but the one that really just made me roll my eyes was an investor who said to me that they were ready to invest, but I would need to put 80% of my fleet would have to be women.
Oh, okay.
Right, on bicycles here in Kenya. So this was a French investor.
Okay. And
it actually irritated me because I spent a few years in France as when I was growing up, and as I lived also in Switzerland before moving here, and I've never seen a woman delivery person in these places. And I felt like you can't make your funding conditional on that.
Yep.
Right? Because that to me is the kind of disrespect that I was talking about, right? This is actually a very, for me, the gender aspect of what we do is something that is with me every minute of the day.
Totally.
So if you want to understand how we do that, it's one thing. But if you're gonna come and dangle this carrot and then say you have to do this, and you're not trying to understand the context in which we're operating.
Right.
So I told them, well, maybe we don't need that money.
Yeah.
I needed the money, but but
I
felt like this is not the kind of partner you want. This is one, but there've been many investors who've come in, we know what you're supposed to do, and this is what we want you to do, and this is what you have to do to get this.
Yeah.
And I just feel like that is it's not even just disrespectful, it's probably just bad money.
Bad money, yeah.
Because, you'll never be able to satisfy them, right? Because they have this preconceived idea of what success would look like, and we know it's tough.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. So maybe you already answered this question, but I was going to ask you, has there ever been a time where you had to choose eWAKA's mission over the money? Because it wasn't super aligned to what you're trying to achieve. And if you did, what did that end up costing you?
Well, in this particular case, it would have been I think money, right? I don't know if it would have ended up in them actually funding us, but I've also turned down, opportunities for funding where I felt like the things that were being insisted upon were things that, to my mind, were not did not show that they had an interest in understanding where we were in our journey. And, you know, it's one investor in particular that I would have loved to be, you know, with. And there was just so much insistence that it had to be their way. And, you know, I felt like if you really are interested in seeing, you know, I am building eWAKA as a company I hope will be here 100 years after I'm gone, right? Like this is really my hope.
Totally.
And so, like, I feel like partners, when you come in as an investor, you when it's like marriage, right? Like people aren't perfect, but you can see whether or not like there's chemistry, like not just like physical chemistry, but chemistry on like where we're going, the vision, like how we want to like raise children, how we want to like live in, you know, 20, 30 years. And so I'm very sensitive to that. Like if there's too much like pushing you around, and, you know, I feel like, you know, again, I'm not, you know, 20 years old. So it's like maybe this one is not the right one, so we'll just wait for the next one. Right?
Just being able to trust your gut on that. If it doesn't feel right, being okay with stepping away, even though it is like a very generous check size. What would be your advice to, you know, one of these younger entrepreneurs that are about to do their first kind of serious fundraising raise, you know, and they've never done it before? What would you say to them, knowing all that you know about fundraising now?
Truly financially, like, do you understand like how you make money? Do you understand how you can, like, and, you know, everybody talks about being a unicorn, but for me that's not really the thing. It's like, do you understand the demand in the market for your product? Do you understand how to actually measure some of these financial metrics? I was a person who like stayed away from finance, right? Like, even though I was a financial lawyer. I was going to say, you worked in like the banking system. Yeah, but, you know, again, you know, as a lawyer, you like kind of like, you know, supporting something and someone else, right? So everyone else, like you do, like I would read the financial statements, but I wouldn't make, like, build them, right? But I've learned that now as an entrepreneur how to like look at, you know, I look at my balance sheet, I look at my, you know, aged debt report, I look at my, you know, daily like revenue from the fleet, right? Like I look at all of these things myself now. I don't rely on someone else. And you need to understand all these things because it helps you understand what kind of money you need and when you need it. I remember like a year ago, I said, I will never take debt, never. Right, and I definitely not US dollar or euro debt. That's just crazy, right? But now I actually have debt in my, you know, capital mix, and it's good debt.
It's good debt.
It's debt that is aligned to what I'm doing, right? Like, and I can pay it back. I can see how it's actually helping me build that traction, right? And the only reason I can do that today is because now I understand how it works. Right, and you know, I also, like, I hear people saying, you know, I wouldn't give, you know, people equity in my company, right? And I actually don't feel so strongly about that, right? I feel like there's good equity and there's bad equity, right? And so these things have helped me, like, and I would say to someone who's starting, you know, understand when and what you're saying yes or no to. And also understand that it's not always no forever, it's maybe no for now, or it's yes today, but just today, right? And that's so important to understand. And then be, you know, I think you have to be really honest about how you're feeling about the way that they're making you feel. Right? Like I've talked to some people, like, and I'm just like, I don't actually like you. So, and I don't think you like me either. You know, and I like to say it's like a dating game. I didn't date much. I got married very young, but I feel like my husband passed the test the first time, right? Because you feel like, are you connecting? And don't ignore that. Don't ignore that. And then maybe the last thing, which I think is also something important to say in the context that we're in, is, you know, especially in Kenya, you know, there's this like feeling that, you know, people are always out to get you. And I think, you know, I don't want to like gaslight anyone, and you know, sometimes it's true, but I think it's so important to be in your context, really understand, is this what is happening now and here, right? Like you need to like and respond to what is actually happening, not everything else in a wider context. I think that's something you see it on LinkedIn, you know, you just see like reactions to things, and then you're like, well, I don't know.
That's true.
Is that really what was happening?
That's true.
So I think we need to be, you know, more honest about what's going on with ourselves, right?
Yeah, you strike me as a very intuitive person, like really trusting yourself, and like if it doesn't feel right, it feels off, like listening to that voice, that internal voice. And I think that's something that I'm constantly working on as well, because I think it can pay off in so many larger ways if you just take the time to really assess and be like, okay, what's actually going on in here in this situation. So I think that's really important. What are you excited about for 2026? What do you got in store for eWAKA, and also for you personally? What's going on with you?
So for eWAKA, I'm really excited about our new board.
Yes.
You know, we had our first board meeting, official board meeting with our real board last week.
Nice.
And, you know, I really felt a deep, deep sense of gratitude.
Oh, that's amazing.
Like these big minds who are doing such great things.
How many on your board?
So with me, 5.
5, okay.
So 4 others. And you know, like these amazing people actually have made it their business to see eWAKA succeed. It's like, you know, I don't like to use the word proud because I feel like it's sometimes not the right word. It was just like a deep, deep sense of gratitude. I was like, thank you, God, like really, because,
that's great.
You know, like really incredible people, you know, who are very busy. And they take the time to talk to me, to my team, right? It's not just me all the time. So I'm excited about that because I think we are, you know, some of the plans we have for this year are very ambitious. And we couldn't do it alone. So it's really time for that. So I'm incredibly grateful for that. We have like some plans to really deepen our penetration in the Kenyan market and in the markets where we are. And we want to be very intentional about that, right? Like I'm really going after revenue and growth this year. And last year was really about building the discipline, operational, financial discipline. And, you know, you've met the team. You know, I feel like we're ready, right? Between, you know, Kwamboka and her team, you know, the technical team with Jimmy, you know, my finance team, my comms team, the writer, you know, management team. I feel like we've put down the rails. And now it's just a question of like executing, right? So that's number 2. And then number 3, I think in terms of fundraising, right, we're still in the middle of our seed round, which we want to close by, you know, the beginning of Q2, end of Q1. We are talking to like really, really good investors. And so we're on track for that. So I'm very excited about that. Now, on a personal level, like, you know, I think for me, this year is really about, like, I want to be very intentional about how I, like, use my energy, right? I really want to be intentional about that. You know, I'm really excited that you're here because this is a test of what I'm talking about, right? Like, I could be doing, and I'm usually doing, like, a million things, right? And I'm so excited about the way we did this, right? Because we didn't prepare, right? Like I didn't have any questions. I was not stressed, but I really wanted to be here 100% because I've seen what you've done, like on the podcast, and I've seen, you know, the way that Miller Center is also like showing up in ways and in, you know, structures that are innovative. And I made a deal with myself that this year I want to be 100% present in everything that I do. I want to notice when people are doing things differently, where I feel like you attract what you are also exuding, and the fact that you're here means that I'm attracting good things, right? Because it's been, so I that's really, for me, this is my personal challenge to myself this year, right? And then not do things that don't feel right.
Yeah.
Right? Like you said, I feel intuitive, but I've wasted a lot of time in the past. And this year I'm really like, I don't think you have to be mean about it. I think you just have to know where the time you have should be spent. And this is really the way I want to go through this year. We're doing a lot of really hard things operationally, technology, like bringing on board like small vendors, riders, you're taking people's lives in your hands and in many ways. And so I need to be 100% there.
Right.
So that's my goal for this year.
Amazing goals, and I have no question that you'll accomplish all of these amazing things. Yeah. What are some books or podcasts that you're listening to or that you love that you would recommend to our viewers? And it doesn't have to be about e-mobility, it can be about anything that interests you.
Edwina Finley, Dickerson. So the book is The World is Waiting for You.
Okay.
Right, and I'm listening to this book for the second time, and it's really about what we were just talking about, right? Like really being deeply connected with where you're going and how you are going, so that is really like my goal for this year. But I have like a whole bunch of books that I want to just tell you which ones, because I'm not very good books. And you said not about e-mobility,
it could be
right?
About anything, just anything that you would recommend. And this is something we ask everybody on the podcast.
I didn't know. Just 1 second, let me tell you. So I recommend that book for being like grounded. While I was at this retreat, I learned a lot about the gut.
The gut.
Yeah. The second brain.
Like the microbiome?
Yeah, the microbiome, the gut, so there's this book called Gut by Julia Enders that I read that is like, it's the second brain, and it has actually changed the way I eat, and it's given me a lot of energy, right? And so that is something that I feel like, has also been part of like this reset for this year.
Right.
There's a book that I'm reading also called Platform Revolution. By Jeffrey Parkhurst, because everything that we do is about platform, right? And we're going to do it differently in Africa than it's been done in the US, right?
For sure. Yeah.
And I'm rereading Atomic Habits.
Oh, yeah, classic.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm rereading that because I've forgotten. And then another book that I reread this Christmas was The Alchemist.
The Alchemist, yep.
Yeah,
classic.
I really feel like, so maybe we stop there because all the
those
other
are all
books,
solid lists.
Those are the
like,
books
those
that,
are good.
That I've been looking at.
Great.
Yeah.
What's one tiny bit of advice or challenge you could give to our leaders and our readers, listeners out there that aligns with your mission and maybe could make someone smile?
If anyone tells you that, in my case, you're too old to do something, point them to me, right? Because I feel like, this whole, journey has like literally given me 10 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like I don't think I have ever been this like stimulated and full of energy and full of hope for this amazing continent. And I've always loved all my jobs, right? Like I've always, like, I have to say I was very happy with my, previous roles, and I've never had a job where I felt like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Everything always felt right, but nothing has felt more right than this, because, you're not just building a company in Africa, right? A lot of people do this, that, we have so many entrepreneurs, brilliant entrepreneurs on this continent and in other continents, right? But I feel like doing it at my age with my, adult kids, like looking at me
Yes.
feels like, like literally deciding to run a marathon after losing like 40 kilos, right? Like it feels like my husband has been like such an amazing supporter, and sometimes I'm like, do you really think I can do this? And he's like my number one fan. And I feel like, if people doubt that they're on the right path, either because people told them that, I don't know, they're not smart enough, or they don't have the money, or they don't have this, or they don't have that, I would say just, look at me. I have to pinch myself every day, right? Like, I can't believe how far we've come.
Yeah.
And no matter what happens in the future, there's like no regrets, right? Because it just feels right.
Yeah. I love that, and I think it's also a testament to you as a mother too. I mean, listening to your son Noah, who sounds amazing. I want to meet your son at one point. Like, he was kind of like the spark, and then coming back to that, I think as well is just cool. So your children must be so proud of you. Like, to have a mother like you, just showing that like this is what's possible if you really tap into that, I think is incredible. So. Yeah, hats off to you, and hats off to your children. You're raising them right. Good for you. Is there anything else that you wanted to share that we didn't talk about in this conversation?
Maybe there's one thing that I thought about before when I was talking about Erin that I also wanted to mention, right? Like, when I was in California, I think that was maybe also another aha moment, right? Like, meeting all these incredible entrepreneurs, especially from India, right? Like, there's a lot of talk nowadays about the, global South, and something, it's a new thing. And for me, right, talking to especially some of the Indian entrepreneurs that I met there, it's fascinating, because I think, India is like so many years ahead of us in Africa, and is really like an example of how you can leapfrog constraints that seem unsurmountable.
Right.
And like seeing how successful they were, like I also saw that in DRK, right? And I feel like just to that question about community, this is really where for me the difference has been, right? It's like sometimes I go into these spaces where I think I'm like carrying the world on my shoulders, and then I meet these like amazing, really demure, humble people who are doing so much more, so much better, at such a greater scale, and they have gone through the same things that I'm going through, and they have overcome them, right? And so I feel like that's one of the things that the communities that Miller Center is building and others are building, that's where you make a huge difference, because you help people see. There's this saying about women and young girls, you can't be what you can't see. And I think for entrepreneurs it's really true, and for African entrepreneurs in particular, whenever I talk to someone from India, and then I see how far India has come, I have hope for us as well, that we can do that. Absolutely. Right? I think Africa is like can learn a lot from that, and so bringing us together and giving us the possibility to learn from one another and to see what is possible is something where that is like truly like valuable and unique about the way that Miller Center does this, and there's a couple others, but that's where I saw it first. So I also want to say thank you for that, right? Because I feel like you don't I know you do, because you guys are very intentional about the way you structure this, but I think you should know that it makes a huge difference to see success, because when you have doubts, you remember that.
Oh, thanks for saying that. That means a lot. And if folks want to reach out, learn more about eWAKA, get in touch, partnership opportunities, what's the best way to reach you? What are all the handles?
So email info@ewaka.tech, www.ewaka.tech, a website, and then all of our handles are eWAKA.
Perfect.
Right, on LinkedIn, we are everywhere. LinkedIn, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook,
Nice.
You can find us anywhere.
Yeah.
And you can also reach me on LinkedIn. I'm very responsive on LinkedIn.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Yeah.
I think we got it. Thank you so much, Celeste.
Thanks,
This was
Karen.
a really great conversation.
Thank you. Thank you.
And thanks for having us
Yeah.
at eWAKA.